And the Browns go in and score again.
4 touchdown passes on the day, and we're not even at halftime.
Throws right side, it's picked off. They got it down the sideline. It's Denzel Ward. He's to the 35, 40. He's to the 50. He's to the 40, 30, 20, 15, 10, 5. Touchdown. A pick six. Denzel Ward is back. On the right side to Chubb. Chubb over the 50. Chubb to the 45. Chubb to the 40. Down the sideline, 30, 25, 20, 15, 10, 5. There he goes. Touchdown, Nick Chubb.
Yes, everyone, welcome to another episode of the Believe in Brits podcast, the UK Cleveland Browns podcast on the Full 10 Yards Network. I'm Josh Henwood, joined as usual by the ever-present Shaun Blundell, also from Full 10 Yards. You'll have you'll realise his voice very quickly if you listen to that podcast as well. I've stopped doing the little highlight clips for a win and a lot because it just gets depressing at this point. I can't remember the last time I was able to make a good one. It was actually only a few weeks ago against the Bengals, but it feels so long ago, Shaun. How are you feeling this afternoon?
I'm all right, mate. I think lots of positives to actually take out of yesterday, but obviously continued frustrations that they continually seemingly find ways in which to beat themselves. I'm sure we'll get into it all, though. But like I said, there were plenty of good things to take away from yesterday. And I'm also buoyed, of course, mate, by a good result in the Football World Cup today. So not bad at all. Obviously wishing our regular Welshman the best of luck for the next 3 minutes of stoppage time, as it's tied at 1 apiece in that game.
Indeed, yes. To first of all, to any listeners who are of an American persuasion, good luck to yourselves as well in what is now the last 2 minutes of injury time. And to any Welsh listeners, as well as, again, 2 minutes of injury time to go, 1-1, and I don't know which way that's going to go. You know what? We might as well call it all the way through. When the full-time whistle goes, you'll know, and you'll have known because there's no way you're listening to it live right now. Unless you are, in which case, welcome. So, yes, wishing Gawain all the best. He has to be placed as out on this one for obvious reasons. But in any case, we will continue to talk about the rather egg-shaped ball rather than the round one for the rest of this show. Let's get straight into this game then. It was not the snow day that we were promised. I was very gutted about that simply because of how awesome the snow did look in Buffalo. If you've been living under a rock, Buffalo is living under mountains of snow. Right now, some of the social media images coming out of it were glorious, especially the stadium pics. It was a good 6-7 feet of snow, even by Friday, of which the decision to move the game was definitely correct. I just really wanted to see Chubb versus Singletary for the entire game, going back and forth in the snow. Both of them not tall enough to actually get through that snow either. So it got moved to Detroit. The game finished 31-23 to the Bills, but the Browns, like you say, Shaun, definitely gave themselves ways to potentially win this game. And in the first quarter, after the first quarter, they were on top, finishing that one 7-3 and moving down to get to 10-3. In the end, total yards, 396 to Bills, 357. Almost double the amount of passing yards at 316 passing yards. I think that's Brissett's best game in terms of passing yards. Could not move the ball on the ground again for love nor money. Nick Chubb only got 18 yards and the team in total got 80. But Browns had more first downs. They did better on third down. They had more plays, allowed less sacks, had less penalties, controlled the time of possession just about. But, and I don't know if you agree with me on this, it never seemed, for all of the Browns' dominance early, you just sort of knew that there would be something to derail it. And whenever it came to a chance for the Browns to take hold, we wouldn't take it.
Yeah, and that's become the theme, hasn't it, really, over the course of the last half a dozen weeks or so, minus the outlier that was that Bengals game. It's seemingly been the case that the Browns have been in and have been competitive in the vast majority of games. But whenever push comes to shove, seemingly always find a way to end up on the wrong side of things. Like you say, the first quarter performance. I mean, well, look, let's forget the first quarter for a minute. Opening drive performance. I'm struggling to think of the last time the Browns took the ball and didn't score a touchdown on their opening drive. Everything that they seemingly have got scripted seems to work right out of the gate. And again, the Bills deferred from the kickoff, as teams generally do, gave the Browns the ball. And you couldn't have wished for a better starting drive. Yet again, 6 minutes chewed upon the clock. Ends with a nice 25-yarder to Amari Cooper, who makes a great catch in the back corner of the end zone. And as you say, the Browns just seemingly at will, whenever it comes to opening drives, just find a way to be able to move the ball. Nick Chubb got involved in the passing game. He took a 17-yard screen pass. Jacoby Brissett had the biggest run on the drive, a 22-yard scramble when the middle of the field completely opened up on a 3rd and 11. And then, like I say, two decent passes to Amari Cooper of 16 yards and ultimately 25 yards result in the touchdown going through. And you've said then it extended into the first quarter. I mean, it almost extended, let's be honest, until a long way into the second quarter. The Buffalo Bills didn't actually get a first down until 8 minutes to go in the second quarter. Their points in the first quarter were off a field goal from a short field, which was set up by a punt return because, yet again, Cleveland special teams continue to, not be that special whatsoever. And then when the Browns were driving on their first drive of the second quarter, again, moving the ball seemingly quite freely until, unfortunately, we fumbled the ball away on a botched snap and exchange between, the third choice centre following the injury to Ethan Pochik on the first play of the game. And like I said, just when the Browns were moving and things were looking good, Kareem Hunt was getting involved in the run game in that particular drive. And that was a big momentum swinger, because ultimately, like I said, the Browns had been really in complete and utter control of the ball game up until that point. As soon as Buffalo got in front, you always felt as though it would be a long road back, and that proved to be the case. However, if you'd have said to anybody, and we joked about the snow game, didn't we, when we were on the air last week, we didn't know just how bad it was going to be. And I think, look, let's be honest, as much as snow games can potentially be fun to watch, it would have been an absolute car wreck of a game to watch.
No,
I mean, there is
just
snow.
a bit.
There is snow
Just
and
a
there is
bit.
snow.
But
And
people were subjected to Jets Patriots this week, though. So
that's very true.
There is that.
No, very true. But yeah, it was ridiculous. And I think the thing that we all said before the game kicked off yesterday was, we're now in a dome. We've now got an angry Bills team. Josh Allen's going to light it up. If you'd have said yesterday that Stephon Diggs was only going to have 4 catches for 48 yards, Josh Allen was going to have less than 200 yards, Jacoby Brissett was going to touchdown him 3-1. Every single stat that you read for this game would suggest that the Cleveland Browns should have come out of this on the winning side. And unfortunately, like I say, in what seems to be a continued pattern, they just find ways to lose games, even when everything that's actually happening in the game would suggest that they should and have, in some cases, done enough to win the game.
Yeah, and that's kind of what I want to touch upon this week. I don't think that actually digging into either the offense or the defense this week actually does much, because, when you look at it, does seem to be the same old problems. We score that opening drive like we have done so many. We've done it 4 times this year, I believe it is, where we scored a touchdown off the opening drive, and we are 0-4 when we score off the opening drive. a touchdown off the opening drive. I saw that on Twitter earlier on, I believe. That could be a completely fabricated stat, but it's what I saw on Twitter, and it does seem to be true. But that therein lies a problem in that. Do we then just go out to just try and score all of our points early? But the defense seemed to have a handle on the Bills early on, and then realistically, it comes down to two things in my mind. One is momentum shifting plays, which I'll come back to in a second. But the second is second half adjustments. Now, commentators love at the start of the third quarter to talk about the kind of adjustments that teams should make in order to, get a positive outcome at the end of the game. Every team that we play seems to come out with these fantastic second half adjustments against us, and it works perfectly. I can't think of a single game where the Browns have made an adjustment that works in the second half. I'm struggling to think of a single game this season where we have actually made adjustments in the second half that has made us better as a team to take us forward. And I think, again, it showed, like you said, the defense in the first half was fantastic, limiting Allen, limiting Stephon Diggs, taking their key weapons away pretty much. The run being a constant threat, but even that, the numbers weren't doing enough to carry the Bills, and they were having to punt it away quite a lot. It's just that the second half, the Bills make adjustments on offense. We don't make adjustments on either side of the ball, it seems. It just seems to be a constant problem, Shaun.
Look, I think there's plenty that you can question when it comes to coaching, and that's obviously something that we'll no doubt talk about. There's continuing chatter around what should or what shouldn't happen in terms of people's opinion on the coaching side of things. I didn't really have too many problems in terms of yesterday from a coaching perspective. It feels that way, but if you actually look at it, the Bills scored 4 field goals in the second half yesterday. They only scored 1 touchdown. Now, the Bills have been a pretty potent team, and I think we all dreaded how many points they may put up. People were half in jest suggesting that they'd put a 50-burger up on us. That didn't happen. I thought, on the whole, the defense played relatively well in terms of bend but don't break, but it obviously gave up key plays at key times. No more so than the really frustrating Stephon Diggs touchdown that you've just called a timeout prior to that play because you didn't like the look, you didn't like the alignment. You end up with 7 Browns defenders dropping back into coverage, and there's only 3 Bills that actually release into a route pattern. So in theory, you could double every receiver and still have a spy at the back of the end zone. For whatever reason, and there's plenty of people who'll try and break it down, and they'll say this guy should have done this and this guy should have done the other. Break it down however which way you want. The reality is 5 players end up in one half of the end zone with 1 Buffalo Bill. It just can't happen. We're too many weeks into the season now for this to continue to be an issue. I think if you look at the Browns on the offensive side of the ball in the second half, again, key times, key moments. I don't think it was so much about coaching adjustments as such yesterday, but they go for a quarterback sneak on 3rd and 1, try and get to the line quickly, try and run the sneak. We've been pretty successful at the sneak throughout the course of the year. But as you said, the Bills had done a good job of locking down our run game yesterday. We were already down our second choice centre, and I'm calling him the second choice. I think it's fair to say Ethan Pouchich has been a brilliant starting.
Oh, yeah. It turns out that he's probably the one you'd want, yeah.
Yeah, and he started the season second on the depth chart, so that's why I'm referring to him that way. But he was out.
Yeah.
So Froholt was playing centre. There'd been a few snap issues, as we discussed. To go for it once on 3rd down, fair enough. To then basically rush back to the line to do the exact same thing. And it seemed on both of them that Brissett hadn't got a handle of the ball straight away. And that almost delayed his attempt to actually get forward. And by the time he started moving, the Bills had already collapsed the pocket and he was going nowhere. And he was rightly short. There's no question about a
Oh,
bad spot
absolutely
or
none.
anything like that.
And in fact,
Yeah.
let me stop you there for a second, Shaun. Let's actually roll this back to the entire of that offensive drive, because you rightly say that handling issues were an issue at that point. Froholt, obviously, he's probably only taken a handful of snaps as a backup centre just in case anything happened. It turns out that Pokic will now be out multiple weeks with a knee injury. According to reports out of Cleveland today. So we're going to have to get used to Froholt taking these under centre unless we are able to sign a centre for next week. Now, for that entire offensive drive, this being a drive only a couple of drives after the fumble, Froholt still snapping low. Brissett is having to adjust, and it's that half a second to a second of adjustment that is causing missed looks, slow to get the ball out for runs. It's actively allowing Buffalo into the pocket quicker because of the fact that he can't react quickly enough. Now, like you say, 3rd and 1, we've been great at sneaking all year. If you do it quickly and try and get them off guard, brilliant. But when it doesn't work the first time, and when it doesn't work because of the fact that, once again, Brissett can't get a hand of the ball quickly enough, and Verhart's getting beaten down the middle, and Buffalo's rush defense has been so brilliant that when they realize what's going on, they can just obliterate the line. There is no way. I don't care about the analytics. I don't care about the percentages. I don't care about how good Brissett has been. You take it as the eye test at this point. There is no way that you are going to complete that sneak in that situation, especially when everybody in Detroit and in Buffalo and in Cleveland knew that you were going to go back to the sneak. I knew it. I had my phone in my pocket at that point. I was walking back home from doing some stuff in a flat that I'm moving to next week, and I didn't actually see what was going. But as soon as he said, "Oh, it didn't complete the sneak on 3rd and 1," I was like, "Oh, he's going straight back for it on 4th. Then I bet you any money, and it won't work." Lo and behold, it didn't work. It just seems to be that these key moments are constantly floundered, and it's because we're refusing to look at things as they are.
Yeah, listen, completely agree. And like I say, that's for me what it was yesterday. It was key things in key moments. That one was, like I say, a real momentum changer. Slightly strange as well because you're at the Buffalo 27, you kick the field goal, you're only 3 points down. Almost compounded then because, of course, you give the Bills the ball back then. They get a 17-yard completion and you're tacking 15 on straight away for a roughing call. They then go 23 yards on the next pass play and then 2 runs of 13 and 5 yards respectively. It was a very quick drive, which was just the punch in the gut then. That felt like game over. To then compound matters, Cleveland respond again with a relatively decent drive, get up to the Buffalo 16, fail on a 3rd and 10, and this time, despite now being down 12 points on the scoreboard, actually go for the field goal, which...
Go for the field goal now. What?
Exactly. It just seemed a strange thing because, ultimately, if you make the field goal, you're still then a 2-score game. It just, the whole thing just seemed a little bit strange yesterday. They went for it in situations that you felt, well, it could have been okay to have gone for the points, and then obviously went for the points in this one, obviously compounded by the fact that the field goal was blocked. And I certainly don't want to jump back up and down on the Cage York bandwagon, but I'm getting a little bit tired of blocked field goals. And I've said today, again, it's trajectory of the kick was the issue, not the protection. So, in other words, Cade York's kicking it too low. He needs to get that corrected. This was a 34-yarder. That is a chip shot in terms of NFL standards.
And he's having problems more with the chip shots than the long ones.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And like I say, it's something that he does need to get, corrected because ultimately, these things will matter when hopefully we are performing at the level that we hope to be in, 12 months' time. I know nobody wants to, acknowledge that, but the reality is this season was always a little bit of a gamble in as much as so many chips were pushed in to 2023. Part of that is Cage York getting experience in games this year, getting live kicking reps, and like I say,
he certainly has that.
Yeah, and ultimately he needs to do a better job of it. So look, I think there were by the time then that you actually then get down to it, the last two drives, 75 yards, pretty explosive drives, both of them. We went 75 yards in 2 minutes 30, 75 yards in 1 minute 37. Plenty of highlight reel plays from Amari Cooper. Donovan Peoples-Jones, I thought, was a real positive again yesterday.
Both were outstanding yesterday. Jacoby Brissett, I felt, had his best game in the Browns jersey as well.
He did. And look, and I know there's often, people will sort of scoff at it and say, well, the Bills just sort of slackened up their coverage once they got that far in front, etc., etc. The reality is we were actually pretty unlucky to not recover the second onside kick. The first attempt was horrendous. But the second one, was very, very close to being recovered. And all of a sudden, okay, there'd have only been 17 ticks left in the ball game. But that onside kick was about 25 yards down the field by the time it went out of bounds. If we had recovered it,
it went out of bounds at about the 38, I think it was, that it went out of bounds. It would have only taken one Hail Mary to get an DPI even.
Yeah, we were certainly in range, like you say, to have a couple of shots at the end zone. So, look, I thought overall yesterday, like I say, some real big momentum shifting plays at key moments, which ultimately were the downfall. Overall, like I say, the defence did pretty well. It is what it is. I'm not going to keep coming on here every week and bemoaning the rush defence. It is what it is. All right, it's not going to improve overnight. It's
that's why I haven't focused on it. I've just been looking to maybe. It might sound like I'm down on it as well, but actually, I was a little heartened by Sunday. Like you say, there were a lot of good things to take from it.
Look, I think it's one of those in terms of the run game. People see things like, and Ndamukong Suh actually eventually being picked up by a team. Ndamukong Suh was always going to be picked up by a team such as the Eagles that are in position to contend, that are in position to pay him the money to be the final piece in terms of a rotation on that defensive line. People expected him to come in and be a plug-and-play starter for the Browns, to take the majority of reps. And, I'm sorry, he's a big name. He was the second overall pick in the draft that he came out of. But Suh's always been more of a pass rusher. He's never really been a great run defender. He wasn't going to change anything. And look, ultimately, like I say, we know what's coming in a fortnight's time. That's really where the Browns have pushed their chips in terms of what they want to do and what they want to accomplish. Plenty of positives yesterday. DPJ, Amari Cooper. Good to see David Njoku back. Obviously played a bit more of a limited role, but obviously what we did see, great to see him back. Obviously that hurdle was a highlight play, which, obviously, like I say, set up. I think that was on the drive that ultimately led to the missed field goal, if I remember correctly. So that was obviously a bit of a shame that it didn't result in points. But obviously great to see Njoku back, albeit on a bit of a pitch count. I'm just checking now, he played 37% of the snaps yesterday. So certainly just sort of testing the waters, getting him back. But like I say, plenty to be, encouraged by, certainly on that side of the ball. Defensively, I think, like I say, there are going to be a number of changes next off-season. So I don't think it's really worthwhile too much going into great depths of detail, but I think there will certainly be as many as 4, possibly even 5 different starters come next off-season. We'll wait and see where they go.
Yeah, I think the best way to describe that really is that, it's difficult to see 31 tacked against you in a game where you've held the Bills to just 350 yards and, 180 of them being passing in what is one of the best passing offenses that you could ever wish for. So, you look at that and you think, well, we probably limited them to quite a few number of points, but I think circumstance more than anything else had also, made the number a little bigger than it should have been. And also, like you say, we weren't a million miles away from our 23 being more like 30, 33. So, realistically, I'd say that it was a lot closer than the score eventually was. There is the potential that there was a little stat padding towards the end, but I think that we're both in the argument of it's not as far away as what we thought. But this is becoming a season where, we are just the nearly men more than anything else. Right, we'll put a sock in that one. I don't think that we were ever going to. I actually think that we enjoyed talking about this game more than I thought we were ever going to, especially after our talk last week. Last week was just downright somber. This seems to be more just. You've had a couple of drinks at like 11 o'clock at night, and you're just sort of a little melancholy about things. That's sort of how I feel a little in my head at the moment about all this. I'm definitely not disheartened by it. And actually, as we look to this next game, I'm a little heartened against a Buccaneers team that is not necessarily a walkover prospect to beat the Browns by. So there is that. First of all, I did promise you an update, although if you're living under a rock, because you're probably listening to this a day or two in the future, but the US and Wales did draw 1-1. So happy news there, I think, all round. Wine gets a first World Cup point for his beloved Wales in a World Cup for like 56 odd years. And any US listeners, well, you got a point as well, which means that everyone can be happy with that. Is that a what beer you got there, Shaun? Is it a beer even?
It is
Or
a
have you gone
beer.
soft on me? Oh, it is.
No, it is a beer, my friend. This is an Aldi special, mate. This is a half pipe session pale ale. So I will give you a scouting report later. I saw it when I was there earlier, and I thought I'd give it a whirl for a Monday evening. Why not?
No, please do. Where I'm moving to next week, and Aldi is opening up on Wednesday, so I'm looking forward to being able to have that on the doorstep. Right, moving swiftly on. These one-on-ones get awfully personal. Moving on, they do though, don't they? Because you kind of end up just filling time more than anything else. Let's move on to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Obviously, having a bit of a mixed bag of a season themselves. Definitely not the walkover that they expected to have in their division. I'm just trying to see as to what their record is at the moment. I think it's 5-5 currently. Yep, there we go. The little indication from Shaun there to confirm 5-5. Beating the Seahawks last time out in Munich, and they've just come off a bye. This one's got a bit of a personal rendering for myself. My missus is a Bucs fan, and moving in together on Friday just in time for this game. It definitely was not planned.
Moving out by Monday.
I think it's just the fact that one of us sleeps on the sofa on that particular night. But yeah, so quite a fun one for myself. How do you see this one shaking out in the main? We won't necessarily go into like key facts or anything. Let's just go on initial feels, shall we say, for this game. I'm actually relatively upbeat about it.
Yeah, look, I think it was certainly 10, 11 weeks ago when everybody does their schedule prediction. Most people, let's be honest, would have had this one down as a defeat and would have been pretty comfortable with selecting that as an option at the start of the season. You look at it in terms of where the team is compared to where you thought it would be, and you've got to be relatively optimistic of your chances in this one. The Bucs are obviously in need of the victory in terms of where they are in the division. A defeat here would actually pull them back to being level in terms of their record with the Falcons, who sit just behind them at 5-6. And ironically, the Saints at 4-7 then wouldn't even be out of the equation in that division, which is just bizarre, isn't it? Because we're sitting here at 3-7 and feel like we're an absolute mile away from any kind of talk of the postseason. But look, it is what it is. The Bucs have managed to find a couple of scrappy wins in the last two, after losing for the first time ever. I think in his career, Tom Brady had lost 3 games in a row. So it's been a really strange season for them. You look at how many points they've put up as a team. In 10 games so far this season, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are averaging 18.3 points per game, which is awful.
Jesus.
Absolutely awful. And I'm just looking down here in terms of teams across the National Football League that have scored less points, and there are only a handful of teams. Some of these teams you would possibly expect. The Houston Texans, who scored 150. The Pittsburgh Steelers, who scored 170. The Denver Broncos, turn away now, Broncos fans, have scored 147.
Yeah, they are bottom.
They are bottom. And then, like I say, then you've got the Rams at 168, which is another one you probably would have expected. And then, like I say, the Bucs at 183. So they certainly have been impotent at best on offense. Defensively, they've only given up 180, though, and that's obviously where, they've stayed competitive in games. And obviously, that's what's enabled them to stay at that 500 record. But ultimately, we're on the road. This is Tom Brady. In all likelihood, we certainly, I would suggest, open the game as underdogs. I've got no idea without looking what the betting spread is, but I would say it's probably something like Bucs by 5 at a guess. I don't know. I'm sure Josh is looking that up as well.
Don't worry, I'm frantically looking now. 2.5.
2.5. Well, I'm quite surprised by that, but but I think that's a reflection of where people see this game being. I think ultimately, can the Browns do enough to take advantage? Because ultimately, what the Browns have lacked in recent weeks, and interestingly, and we'll this will link us back to talk about coaches, is we've lacked turnovers. We've lacked real big, key moments that have shifted momentum our way. Just when we looked like we were getting a drive going the other day, a costly fumble. Just when it looked like, we might put some points on the board, a field goal blocked. I jokingly messaged, and you were the first person to reply yesterday, Tyler Bass lines up for a 56-yarder, and the commentary team and the Bills sideline are making it look like this is going to be one of the most difficult kicks of Tyler Bass's career. He's only got a 50-odd, season long. And he strokes it in from 56. He would have been good from at least 66, right through the middle of the uprights. And I said there and then, does anybody miss a kick against the Cleveland Browns? Because it just feels as though none of these momentum-shifting plays come our way. Hopefully at some point it changes. I suppose you could make the argument, let's save all of that for next year, which is when we really want to be competitive, and let's have all the luck and win all the turnover battles next season. But like I say, I mentioned turnovers, and I mentioned it specifically because one of the things that started to become a little bit of a worry, and I'm high on Kevin Stefanski in terms of him as a head coach, and I find some of the talk around him a little bit puzzling, if I'm being completely honest. But certainly in terms of Joe Woods, I think we all know where the vast majority of the fan base stand on the Joe Woods side of things. Mike Prefer, I think, is even more dead in the water. So I'm just working on the assumption that Mike Prefer's not coming back next year. But in terms of Joe Woods, lots of talk now in terms of Grant Delpit yesterday with some very, very questionable comments in the press conference. Miles Garrett with some questionable comments in the press conference around, we're not even putting enough emphasis on turnovers during practice. There's been comments previously from John Johnson, Denzel Ward. There's lots and lots.
Denzel Ward has climbed back. Did you hear what Denzel Ward said today? Essentially saying that we've got a good defensive coordinator. Joey's a good defensive coordinator. We've just got to execute better. I feel like he's climbing down a little bit. I think he's had a little slap on the wrist from previous comments, and he's maybe climbing down a bit, but he's definitely said stuff in the past. And there has been such mounting pressure. But Stefanski did dodge questions about both Woods and Prefer today by just saying, I'm just focused on making the team better. That was the official line out of Berea.
Yeah, and look, I think the thing is what people need to. There's two lines of thought with this, isn't there? There's always going to be the people that think, look, make the decision now, move on. You set that standard if you like, that this isn't acceptable, blah, blah, blah. The reality is, more often than not, any kind of coaching changes partway through a season generally create more problems than they do solutions. You've only got to look at the Browns when they moved on from Hugh Jackson, and we ended up winning a few games, falling in love with Freddie Kitchens, and making one of the worst coaching hires that ultimately put this franchise back yet another 12 months or so. Bear in mind, this should have been year 4 of Kevin Stefanski, and we're only in year 3 because of that Freddie Kitchens hire. I hear a lot of chatter that people say Stefanski needs to give up the offensive play calling side of things so that he can improve the special teams and the defensive, side of the ball. And I'm struggling to understand when you've got Jacoby Brissett, who's been nothing more than a career backup, playing, arguably, and I think the stats will back this up, at a top 10 QB level, and an offense that's not struggling to move the ball, and you're getting good production out of the likes of Donovan Peoples-Jones, as we discussed, that you've turned David Njoku into a legitimate tight end one after a floundering career to this point where, he's shown glimpses, but certainly nothing consistently. Why people want to take Kevin Stefanski away from the thing he does really well to try and improve another area is beyond me. I think the reality is the decision has probably been made, certainly in terms of Prefer. Like I say, I will be gobsmacked if Mike Prefer is back next year. Joe Woods, I'm personally on the fence in terms of, for my opinion, I think there are better options out there. But when
you just reckon that AB might not let him go. Yeah.
That's when I say that I'm on the fence. I'm not sure that decision has necessarily been made. But what I would say is these decisions will come at the end of the season. They're not going to happen now. If they were going to happen,
there's no point to do them now.
Exactly. If they were going to have happened by now, they would have happened. And the one thing that everybody keeps saying, and this is the only week that we've done this podcast and our friend Chris hasn't been commenting along, but Chris every week keeps telling us, don't worry, Deshaun Watson solves everything. Now, I'm not in the Deshaun Watson solves everything camp. I'm far from that camp. However, what I would say is the old cliche is that sometimes offense is the best form of defense. And the reality is, if Kevin Stefanski can get this level of production from the offense with a subpar quarterback, and let's be honest, that's what he is, and that's not being disrespectful. That's his record. That's his career.
I'm allowing that assessment. Continue.
Yeah, if he can get it with that, if Deshaun Watson is who the franchise hopes he is in terms of the on-field product, then surely the sky's the limit for this team. And the reality is, although you don't want to get to that situation, you want to go into every game thinking, even if our defense allows 40 points this week, we're still going to win this game because we're going to score 41 or more. It's a dangerous mindset to be in. You obviously want complementary football, but ultimately, that's the difference, or that's the hopeful difference that people are expecting to see, and people are expecting to see the jump and see, the difference year to year. And I do think that, like I say, a lot of the decisions that have been made in terms of personnel, in terms of free agency moves that did or didn't happen, a lot of it has all been designed with 2023 in mind. And, as much as none of us probably wanted to acknowledge that or admit that 10, 11 weeks ago, I think the reality is that's exactly where this season was always going to be. We hoped we'd have a few more W's on the board so we could get a little bit of late season excitement. There will still be an optimist out there that says, well, we've got a 2% chance, according to ESPN, to make the playoffs. And until we're dead, we're going to keep, believing that we can make it. Look, it's going to take the miracle of all miracles for the Browns to get anywhere near the postseason. But hopefully what we can see over the course of the next 6 or 7 weeks is, get the rustiness off Deshaun Watson, get him back out there on the field. It feels a little bit harsh on Jacoby Brissett to some extent because I think he's probably played better than anybody could have expected him to have played. We were sitting here, mate, 11 weeks ago thinking he'd throw for less than 1,500 yards. He may even be benched for Joshua Dobbs by week 6. And, here we are, like I say, 11 weeks on, and we've got a top 10 quarterback in the NFL based on the stats. So, he hasn't been, anywhere near as bad as we thought that he might be. But obviously the hope is that Deshaun Watson is just that much better. And like I say, we better hope in terms of the trajectory that the franchise has taken that is the case. But anybody that doesn't want to see what Kevin Stefanski can do with him, I just am absolutely staggered at that mindset and of that opinion. And I know a lot of it's just born out of frustration because nobody likes losing, obviously. But how you can think taking a brilliant offensive mind and having him look at special teams and having him look at defense, Stefanski needs to do that by keeping those people accountable. And I do think that will come. like I say, I'll be amazed if there aren't at least one change for absolutely sure. And I think it would be more of a surprise than anything if Joe Woods doesn't ultimately end up paying the price. But I do think there'll be a lot of player turnover on that side of the ball as well, which is why I think, like I say, the Joe Woods one is probably still up for a little bit of debate, although I know a lot of people won't want to hear that.
Yeah, I mean, so there's lots to unpack there. For me, I can understand some Kevin Stefanski frustration. I definitely am in the same boat as you when, I've heard the same sort of thing that you have, where they've said, well, if he gives up play calling, he'll be able to give more time to being able to show defense and special teams. Now, realistically, it's not his job. He helps out with the coordinator, but realistically, that sits with the coordinators. So I don't see much credence there. For me, the frustrating thing about Kevin Stefanski is twofold. One is the baffling decision making when it comes to crunch time in games. We saw it in the Bills, going for another sneak on 4th and 1, for example. That was a real momentum shifting play. There have been plenty of others throughout this season, the season before and the season before that, where it's just like, Kevin, what are you doing? And the conservative mindset after taking even the slightest lead against a good team. I feel like it's incredibly difficult for us to beat a good team, because if we actually do get out to a surprise lead, he'll hold on to it for dear life, and every single time it gets snatched away from him almost cruelly because of just how hard he's holding it. It's like getting a little kitten for the first time. I remember in my family, we had a really small kitten, and my sister, she was about 4 years old, she was giving it, and she was hugging it so damn tight that they actually had to end up giving it back because she was going to kill this poor kitten. That's Kevin Stefanski with a small lead against a top 5 team. It's being that conservative with a lead, and it drives me around the bend. But like you say, when you look at the way in which he can make Jacoby Brissett have this kind of season, and Donovan Peoples-Jones, he was a 6th round pick, but he's playing like a legitimate second wide receiver at the moment. Amari Cooper's having a great season, and this is with balls being thrown by Jacoby Brissett in a run-heavy offense. Realistically, I prefer us to pass at the moment. I did not think I would say that at week 11 of this season, but here we are. So yeah, for me, it's the momentum shifting play, but also it's potentially the player management as well. Like, a lot of crap gets out to the media, it seems, by our players. Whenever we start to lose, there's a lot of chat. There is a lot of chat, especially on the defensive side of the ball, which makes me think, number one, no one respects Joe Woods first and foremost, because surely that stuff we've done the defense had a players only meeting. Again, only a couple of weeks after the last one. I think it's because they don't respect Joe Woods whatsoever. Pretty much. That's what I read into it from that. And secondly, the reason why it gets out to the media rather than just go above Joe Woods' head is because they feel like they don't get support off Kevin Stefanski. I can definitely understand that as a potential negative against his name. But like you say, in terms of what he does on the offense, he does a great job of it. So, there is that. Bringing it back to this game, because I realised that we got very, very sort of like philosophical almost about the way in which the Browns organization is run. Like you say, this one obviously a lot closer simply because of the fact that Tampa is not scoring the amount of points of which they have been. Their defense is obviously strong. So once again, you're probably looking, if you can get to 24-ish points, then you're probably getting towards the max end of what the Bucs are going to allow you to do. Now, Tampa are a pass-heavy offense, of which has been floundering of late. Obviously, not getting the wide receivers on the same page. Tom Brady seems to be finally taking a step back in terms of his performance. But is the run game a concern with Rashad White now over the last couple of games, Shaun?
Mate, let's be honest, the run game would be a concern with Barry White, let alone Rashard White. So, let's be honest, anybody has a field day when it comes to the Browns and the run defense. So, there will be heavy, heavy doses, you would imagine, of the run game. The issue, like we've said, we haven't dwelled on it too much, is, there isn't an obvious solution to that in terms of personnel. They obviously picked up Ben Still or Stille or, however it's pronounced from the Dolphins. He played a few snaps this week, didn't really even hear his name called during the broadcast, which would suggest that, and again, not to be expected of that kind of pickup, that he would make a huge difference. So it is what it is in terms of that run defense. What you want to hope, of course, is that the Browns can do what they have done in recent weeks, and that's get up early. Again, I'm a big advocate for this team taking the ball first if we win the toss and trying to actually get points up on the board. I think that's the way for the Browns to try and win, games at this moment in time. They're built more to play from in front. Obviously, what the Bucs are going to do, you would imagine, is that they are just going to absolutely crowd the line of scrimmage and try and shut down the run game, which has now been shut down, let's be honest, for the best part of 2 or 3 weeks. We haven't really got it going. It coincided initially with David Njoku picking up that injury, because I think it's probably underrated how much he actually brings in terms of his blocking ability, which is something that obviously he, notoriously in the past at least hadn't been renowned for, but certainly in recent times, that's been a real big, thing that he's improved upon. But ultimately, like I say, it has been shut down in the last few weeks. Kareem Hunt's had a really difficult season, as we know. But if you look at in terms of what the Tampa Bay defense has done in terms of the yards it's given up, it gave up 39 yards to the Seahawks in Munich. Kenneth Walker had been on a tear up until that point. He'd only gave up 39 yards. He gave up only 68 the week before. Okay, that was to the Rams, who notoriously struggled to run the ball. So in the last couple of games, they've really, really turned the screws in terms of that run defense. However, in the couple of weeks before that, the Carolina Panthers managed to put up 170 yards on the ground. The Baltimore Ravens managed to put up 222 yards on the ground. So, they are a team that you can get at. They do seemingly, like I say, seem to have found a bit of a way to turn the corner in recent weeks, probably simplifying a bit of the game plan. And like I say, ultimately just getting back to basics. But it's a bigger game for Tampa Bay than it is to Cleveland. And I think sometimes that actually plays into the underdog's hands as well, because it's a free swing for the Browns now, isn't it? Any hope of the postseason, if there is any, and I'm certainly past any hope of the postseason, but if there is any, it's winning.
I can definitely show you the way.
Oh, yeah.
I can definitely show you how you'd work it out.
Yeah,
you'd have to win this week. You'd have to win this week.
Yeah, well, listen,
you can lose. You can lose one. You can lose one. You can lose one, and realistically, the Ravens.
I think even if you lose one now, though, you're probably then relying on a whole heap of other things going your way. The reality is, if they've got any chance, it's get to 10-7, and then you hope that the tie breaks go in your favour. And if they do get to 10-7 from this point, a lot of the tie breaks will, because that would put us at 5-1 in the division, for example. So you'd be in a really strong position with tiebreakers. But look, we're talking pipe dream stuff. Like I said,
I know. I'm just adding a bit of belief to the Believeland Brits podcast.
Indeed, mate. Indeed. Look, this is a tough enough game as it is, but it's a game, like I say, I think you can approach it with some confidence, buoyed by what you've seen on the offensive side of the ball this week. Like I say, in terms of the defense overall, I think there was signs that there were certainly things that were better, but they obviously need to eliminate those key mistakes on big plays, and they need to stop having these coverage breakdowns. So overall, mate, certainly not a game that you're dreading, which is potentially one that you would have been when the schedule came out, because we all looked at this 3-game stretch and thought it was going to be pretty rough. The Dolphins was pretty rough. The Bills was a lot better than expected. Hopefully we can make it 2 out of 3 in terms of better than anticipated with a decent performance on Sunday.
Yeah, and something of which I don't think anyone's really thought about too much because they think about what's happening next rather than the here and now. This is Brissett's last game for us in all likelihood. I'd quite like him to go out with a bang. Quite honestly, give him the opportunity to go out there and put on a resume. He's obviously looking to go somewhere and be a potential starter while a rookie can grow somewhere else, most likely. Earn himself a few more cash dollars. I'd quite like him to be able to be allowed to do what he's done even last week. Just be allowed to throw it about a bit.
Look, I think that's a really great point, mate. And like you say, it is something that I'll be honest, I've overlooked it from that perspective. But yeah, as you say, I think he obviously only signed a 1-year deal. Do I think the Browns would have interest in bringing him back as the backup? Yes, I do. But whether they would, like you say, be able to convince him on the basis that, look, essentially, this is only for, as you say, some guaranteed money because Shaun is very much the guy. Or is he going to get the opportunity elsewhere? You look around where there potentially might be openings and, realistically, where there'll be openings that aren't going to necessarily be solved through the draft. Because if you look at somebody like the Texans, for example, they're going to swing at the top of the draft. I'll be gobsmacked if the Texans don't swing at the top of the draft.
Oh, yeah, they would. But like in Indianapolis, for example.
Yeah, well, that's what I was going to say. There will be certain teams that obviously, will be, potentially looking for a bit more of a veteran presence. Indianapolis probably not the best example in as much as he's already been there. But he would probably do better than some of the ones that they've had in recent times. But you look around elsewhere, I think, are the Las Vegas Raiders convinced on Derek Carr? That seems to be an ongoing one that, there seems to be this sort of breakdown as to whether Derek Carr's the man there or he isn't the man there. So that's one to potentially keep an eye on. Elsewhere around, you'd look at somebody like potentially, the New York Jets. They're not going to be in a position high up in the draft. Not going to be in a position high up in the draft to address the quarterback position. And I think if you listen to Jet fans, particularly today after the performance that Zach Wilson put out there, a steady, reliable pair of hands, could be something that would appeal to somebody like that. But there aren't tons of obvious options for him. So it may well be, like I say, that the Browns can convince him to come back on that backup deal. Ultimately, if it's not Jacoby Brissett, then we probably will need to address that position. I'm not sure they'd go into it with Joshua Dobbs as number 2 on the depth chart, but obviously we'll wait and see. But yeah, as you say, it'd be really fitting for him to go out with a bang. I think he deserves it in terms of what he's actually put out there on the field. I think, like I say, at the start of the season, if you'd have offered us the statistics and in general the level of play that we've received from Jacoby Brissett, you'd have absolutely bitten anybody's hands off. I think it's a career year for him in terms of his completion percentage. He's at 64.4%, which is, I've just double checked, it is absolutely a career high for him, in terms of what he's been able to do throughout the course of his career. So that's obviously great to see. His quarterback rating is 90.7 for the year. Again, that's a career high.
I'd have bitten your hand off. I'd have bitten your hand off at a 90.7.
Of course, mate. We absolutely all would. I mean, look, he's got 11 touchdowns on the year. That's the bit that you'd like to see improve. But like I say, ultimately, you knew what you were getting when you brought the guy in. But overall, I think he's been really good. I certainly think, like I say, he had an excellent game yesterday. And yeah, like you say, let him hopefully go out with a bit of a bang. It'd be great to see him sign off with a win. And then obviously, like I say, it will then put some confidence into the team for, the following 6 weeks of the season, which, as I say, whether people want to admit it or they don't, the reality is that's what this season has been all about. It's been really about those last 6 games of the season. We obviously hope that they would be more meaningful in terms of playoff implications. But even if they weren't, and they obviously aren't, the reality is it's what does this team look like with number 4 behind centre? And obviously we'll get to see that in a week or so's time. So tough defence for him to throw against. Tampa's past defence has been pretty good all year. I'm just looking now, the most yards they've given up is 248 to the Packers back in week 3. So they've been pretty stingy in terms of
Yeah.
pass defence. But yeah, let's hope Jacoby lights it up, mate. It'd be great to see, wouldn't it? And a good way for him to sign off.
It would. I'm glad that it's in front of a home crowd as well. I just feel like he deserves some appreciation, from everyone, because no one gave him a chance in hell. He's taken his opportunity. In prime time, he definitely didn't do himself any disservice either. Won both games that were on television, of which is good for him as well. And let's hope that he's able to sign off with something. Okay, right. Before we go, give us a prediction, mate, for this one scoreline.
Do you know what? Let's be optimistic. I'm going to go for the Browns to somehow win this one, 20 points to 18.
Oh, do you know, I've got 23-22 Browns on this one. I actually think it's going to be one of those really odd ones that ends up being stingy but close. And also, if I didn't have some form of confidence, Sunday's going to be crap for me from flipping dusk till dawn because Lou will be at me all day and then probably for the next week and year afterwards. But it's nothing I haven't faced before, of course, with the Bucs winning last time out. In terms of the pick'ems, by the way, that was us just picking some scores, but the actual pick'ems. And I'm glad, in a way, that he's not here tonight, celebrating that draw for Wales instead of now. You could just imagine him just smugly grinning from ear to ear as I say this. Owain has now taken top spot by storm in the Cleveland Brits League. He is top on 104 points, all on his own, after a pretty damn good 11-point week with a game still to go. Victor is in second place now with 102 points after a 13-point week so far. That means that he is that perfect?
He's perfect, isn't he? There's a game tonight and there's 4 teams on the bye, so he's perfect heading into Monday Night Football.
Right, so Victor's disqualified for being a bot or something like that, or part of some betting scandal. There is no way that you can have a perfect week, sir. I demand to see some credentials. I knew that looked sus. Shaun, you're not doing too badly either, son. You got 9 points currently this week, which means that you're on 97. Which way have you gone tonight, mate? God, have you gone 49ers or Cardinals?
It feels like I picked that about 10 weeks ago. So hang on, let me just double check for you. I think I'm pretty much.
Please tell me it's the 49ers.
I'm on the 49ers, mate. Yeah, I'm on
That's
the 49ers.
all right. And it means that you're not going to usurp me this week. I've had an absolute terrible ride these last few weeks. As everyone that listens to this will know, I was probably the only one on this pod that was riding the Jets yesterday, to which my last play curse hit them like a bullet train, as well as I think with a couple, the Bears and the Falcons as well was another one that really hit me in the face, and the Broncos as well. Yeah, just too many hitting me in the face this week. Yeah, you bet the Broncos as well, didn't you, mate? Never again. Definitely
never again. I've said that every week since week 3. Never again, but I really mean it.
I know,
and
I'm
again.
pretty sure. 1 second. The Broncos are playing the. Come on, you're here somewhere. Yeah, the Broncos are playing the Panthers, and I picked the Broncos because I can't trust Baker Mayfield.
Baker Mayfield all the way. Come on, Baker, do the job.
I've gone from being a Baker bro to a Baker realist, and his shoulder's just not there anymore. So I'm hoping he comes through for me again, but in the worst possible way. Anyway, that is us for this week. Thank you very much for listening to us. We'll be back next week on Monday to discuss the Browns' fantastic win over the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, how our 2% chances of being in the playoffs has turned to 4.5%, and then our next game. What is our next game after? Oh, the Houston Texans, of course, for the Deshaun Watson comeback, of which we will look to be 99% not about Deshaun Watson. Yeah, that's probably the best way to put it. That's us for now. Enjoy the round football for as long as you can until the egg shake comes back on Sunday, and we will be back next week.